Hello and welcome to Written Words. I'm Helen, and in my last few videos and social media posts you might have noticed that I'm on a bit of a Dickens spree at the moment. I'm really enjoying working through Dickens books. And when I was preparing for this video, I had a look along my bookshelves to find all the books by Dickens that I had, and I was quite amazed to find quite how many I had. I found this enormous pile of Dickens books. Some of them I've read and some of them are waiting to be read. My current read is Our Mutual Friend, although I've only just started that, so it'll be a little while before I can report back on that one. In my videos on GCSE texts, I looked in quite some detail at A Christmas Carol, and a couple of the books are very old and have been in our family for several generations. This beautiful copy of A Christmas Carol is from 1944, and it has nice large print and also some beautiful illustrations, some of them in black and white and some of them in full colour. And then in between there are lots of little Christmas themed illustrations as well. There's a little turkey there, a Christmas tree on that page, and they're all different all throughout the book. And then I also have a very beautiful copy of the Pickwick Papers, which was given to me by my grandparents. It doesn't have a date in it, but I believe it's from around the turn of the 20th century, so it's about 100 years old. And one of the beautiful things about it inside is the illustrations. It has some beautiful illustrations covered with protective tissue paper, and the tissue paper has the quote on it that the picture is illustrating underneath. So this one is Mr. Jingle and the Spinster Aunt, and then behind we have a beautiful illustration there, and this one is the elder Mr. Weller with a little quote about him, and then beneath the tissue paper we have Mr. Weller himself. So that's a beautiful and very treasured copy of the Pickwick Papers. Hopefully there'll be a video on the Pickwick Papers sometime in the future. But the reason why I find myself attracted to Dickens' writing is his amazing mastery of language. He really knows how to use the English language and manipulate it to get the best effects. And that is in spite of his lack of formal schooling. Dickens had quite a difficult childhood. His father was sent to prison, to a debtor's prison, and Charles was sent at the age of 12 to work in a factory. He subsequently ended up working in a court as a scribe, which is presumably where he picked up his mastery of language. He was clearly a very driven person and very determined, and he was largely self-taught. So a couple of weeks ago, when I found myself in London with a couple of hours to spare, I visited the Charles Dickens Museum. So in this video I'm going to share some of the thoughts and impressions that I brought back with me from my visit to Charles Dickens Museum. The Charles Dickens Museum is located at 48 Doughty Street, which is about 15 minutes walk from King's Cross Station in central London. This was the house where Dickens lived for just under 3 years, quite early in his marriage. The couple had just one child when they moved here, but they went on to have another 9. Although the Dickens family only lived here for a short period, the museum also houses many items that have been brought from their other homes. I'm used to seeing pictures of Dickens as an older gentleman with a receding hairline and a bushy beard, but a pair of portraits by Samuel Lawrence, a family friend, in the morning room portray a much younger and rather dashing looking Dickens with his equally good looking wife Catherine. Unfortunately, theirs wasn't the happiest of marriages, and it ended in separation in 1858, which was quite scandalous at that time. Dickens published an article attempting to justify his actions in one of his journals, and the article itself is also on display in the museum. Moving into the dining room, I was intrigued to find a samovar. It seems that, although traditionally Russian, they were also a popular and fashionable feature in dining rooms in Victorian England too. My imagination wandered as I saw this leather armchair and imagined Dickens sitting in it. Oliver Twist was one of the works written when Dickens lived in this house, and a note on the chair tells us of his brother-in-law, Henry Burnett's, recollection of watching him at work on Oliver Twist. He says, "It was interesting to watch, upon the sly, the mind and the muscles working, or if you please playing, in company, as new thoughts were being dropped upon the paper, and to note the working brow, the set of mouth, with the tongue tightly pressed against the closed lips, as was his habit." So it was quite fun to try and imagine Dickens' face as he sat in the armchair working on Oliver Twist. And then I wondered, could this be the chair that Dickens had in mind when he wrote about Scrooge sitting at home in A Christmas Carol? After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell. A disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that, as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. Another fascinating item of furniture was Dickens' reading desk. Dickens was known for giving public readings of his work, and the reading copy displayed on the desk shows Dickens' notes in the margin where he added stage directions and shortened some of the text to make his performance more theatrical. Probably the most notable exhibit in the museum is, of course, Dickens' writing desk. This particular desk has been brought from one of Dickens' later homes at Gadhill Place, where he wrote many of his later works, including A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, and Our Mutual Friend. So it's quite likely that this was the desk where these immortal lines were penned. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. I particularly enjoyed the display on the Dickens family's pets. Apparently the family had many pets, including dogs, cats, and various kinds of birds. Needless to say, animals found their way into many of Dickens' books, such as Bullseye in Oliver Twist, or Miss Flight's birds in Bleak House. "Here, Bullseye." The dog looked up and growled. "See here, boy," said Sikes, putting his other hand to Oliver's throat. "If he speaks ever so soft a word, hold him. Do you mind?" The dog growled again, and licking his lips, eyed Oliver as if he were anxious to attach himself to his windpipe without delay. "He's as willing as a Christian, strike me blind if he isn't," said Sikes, regarding the animal with a kind of grim and ferocious approval. "Now you know what you've got to expect, master, so call away as quick as you like. The dog will soon stop that game. Get on, young un." Bullseye wagged his tail in acknowledgment of this unusually endearing form of speech, and, giving vent to another admonitory growl for the benefit of Oliver, led the way onward. She partly drew aside the curtain of the long, low garret window and called our attention to a number of bird cages hanging there, some containing several birds. There were larks, linnets, and goldfinches. I should think at least 20. I began to keep the little creatures, she said, with an object that the wards will readily comprehend, with the intention of restoring them to liberty, when my judgment should be given. Yes, they die in prison, though. Their lives, poor silly things, are so short in comparison with chancery proceedings that one by one the whole collection has died over and over again. I doubt, do you know, whether one of these, though they are all young, will live to be free. Very mortifying, is it not? Down in the basement there's even a little hedgehog called Bill Spikes, presumably named by the museum staff, not by the Dickens family themselves, as Victorian households often kept hedgehogs as pets because they kept unwanted creepy crawlies at bay. Unfortunately, human houses were not the ideal environment for hedgehogs, so they rarely lived long. So if you're interested in Dickens' work too, and you find yourself in London at any point, I highly recommend a visit to the Charles Dickens Museum. Do you have a favourite book by Dickens? And if so, why do you like it? I'd be very interested to hear your views, so please feel free to share them in the comments. As my last few videos have been focused on literature, my next few are going to look more at language, and I'm going to delve into some of the interesting facets of the English language, as well as sharing one or two more of my own pieces of work. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, happy reading and happy writing.